Welcome to Water, the podcast. If you work in water, whether it's treatment, distribution, wastewater, or management, this podcast is for you. In each episode, you'll hear a unique story and gain fresh insight from a colleague inside the water industry. Here's your host, filmmaker and municipal operator, John Parsons. Enjoy this episode.
So today I'm with Jim Kershaw, and he's the superintendent at the Bismarck water treatment plant. So Jim, I want to welcome you to Water, the podcast.
Well, thank you, John. Appreciate it.
It's an absolute honor to have you here, and I'd just love to hear your story. How did you get into this water business?
Well, I actually went to what they call power plant technology up at the local university, 2-year program. It ended up being there wasn't any power plant jobs in 1983, 84 when I graduated. There was an opening here with the city of Bismarck, so I started in March of 1984 as a water plant operator. I did that for 29 years. Then I became supervisor in 2013, did that roughly 5 years, and I've been superintendent for about 6 years now. So I've got 40 years in the water business here at the Bismarck water plant.
Well, you certainly know what you're doing here. I remember last year when I came here and we were doing a piece for educating STEM, for educating kids, and we toured the plant, and you just were so fabulous at explaining how everything worked for us, and that was just a fun thing that we were doing there. But you have this great responsibility, really, for how many gallons of water every day pass through this place?
Well, we average roughly 10 million gallons a day, but here, being we're in the northern climate, our peak demands are in the summertime, where we can be close to our 28 million gallons per day capacity. And normally in the wintertime, we average about 6.3 to 6.5 million, but you do for a 365-day year, it's roughly varies, of course, depending on how dry our summers are, but we're between 9 and 11 million gallons a day average.
That's a lot of water.
Yeah, basically we do about 3.5 to 4 billion gallons a year.
Right. Yeah. So I've recently become the water operator in a small city, and if we use 20,000 gallons in a day, that's a busy day.
We can do that in about a minute, John, during our peak time.
Yeah, that's kind of amazing. So of course, when I came here and you started showing me this system of how you take all of this water out of the Missouri River and make it drinkable, I was absolutely fascinated. So for other people that are in the industry, what are the big challenges that are involved in that process?
Well, a good water source is probably number one. We are very fortunate here to have the Missouri River, and we have both a surface water intake from the old days, and then also we have a horizontal collector well that we've been running a little over 10 years now. So our future expansion, they'll each do about 30 million gallons a day. So with our future expansion, we'll be doing some form of blending of waters and coming up with keeping our parameters the same on hardnesses and things like that, alkalinities and things like that.
So is that horizontal water intake, is that a common thing in other situations where they're taking water out of a river or something like that?
What they are is they're actually a caisson sunk down into the bed of the river, so that's groundwater under the influence of a surface water. I know Kansas City, Missouri, I believe, has one, and there's several other ones, I think in Minnesota and other places, but I don't know how many there is actually, but they are fairly rare from what I know, and like I said, they follow the surface water rules because they are under the influence of surface water. So you get water from the aquifer plus also water from the surface water.
I was absolutely fascinated when we went down there and went around. I mean, this thing is amazing.
Yeah, it's a different technology, and it has its ups and downs and advantages and benefits, but one thing it does, it gives us flexibility, because if something happens with our surface water intake, we've got a roughly 30 mgd down there. It also uses sand bed filtration, so we don't have the turbidity issues like during spring runoffs and things, but yet we have a little higher pH and also a little less hardnesses and things in their source water, or river source water, or surface water.
So, I mean, there's this process that it comes through, and the sand beds are up here, right, in the plant. They're
Well,
not
we have filters, yes. We do lime softening here traditionally now. We're actually looking for our 10 million gallon expansion for the future that we've been working on about 2 years now, and we've been in the planning process and the piloting stuff. We're actually looking at membrane filtration.
How does that work?
Well, they use just different plates and different polymetric type, or we're actually looking at the ceramic plates that actually they'll neutralize the water of the chemicals or of the minerals that are in the water, and then we use a reverse osmosis to actually clean up the water completely, and then we blend it back in. Grand Forks and Fargo actually are using that technology on train, but yet they still have lime softening. So we're kind of following their lead on that. And that's another thing, it gives us more flexibility. If we can't get, say, lime or some of the chemicals we need for our lime softening process, we can go to that also. So we've got a lot of flexibility here with what intakes we can run, what processes we can use, especially once we get the membranes.
Right. So those membranes sound really interesting to me as to how they work. You know, can you sort of describe that a little
They're
more?
basically, I don't know a lot about them.
Right.
They're basically an ion exchange method because,
Right.
like I said, I started 40 years ago on lime softening. I'm learning. That's something I've learned something every day I've been here in over 40 years. And like I said, the membrane filtration is kind of new to me, but basically it uses the ion exchange method to take some of your things out of the water. You add your chemicals. You have to oxidize the water sometimes, depending on what's in there, just to make the whole process work. So I'm still learning, John.
It's much more of a chemical sort of process than let's say it operates more on these sort of principles of ions and all of that than does normal chemistry.
Kind of like a home water softener.
Right.
Is how I'd best
Right.
describe how they are.
Right.
And like I said, I'm far from an expert on membrane filtration, but I'm learning more and more all the time. When I started, we actually had flocculation and lime softening. We had the old basin that was put in since the 1920s.
Right.
Because this plant's 100 years old this year, and we've just modified the grounds. We've changed processes. I don't think there's been a year that hasn't gone by where we've had some type of construction. We just did a total rehab on some of our old original filter piping that was underneath some of our original conventional filters, sand and anthracite coal.
So that because we had a look at that these big lime softening basins that you have here when we were making this film, and I was fascinated by the whole process because it's I mean they're enormous.
Well, they're basically what we have is we have a 6 million gallon per day unit that was put in the 1950s, which we're still using. We have a 12 million gallon unit that was put in the 1970s, which is kind of our bread and butter one. And then we added lime softening when we got rid of the old plant and some of the super pulsator stuff. We actually have super pulsator technology that doesn't do softening, that only did turbidity removal. So that was put in the 90s, but then we went to all softened water here in 2013 or 14, I believe. So we soften all the water right now, where we used to blend the super pulsator water, and that's a different technology too. It works really well. I know for wastewater plants in Europe they're real popular, but they need high turbidity to actually make them function properly. Where except during runoff, our Missouri River is fairly clean. And then when we got the collector well, it kind of made that obsolete. But we're going to rehab a lot of that stuff and use it for our membrane stuff. We're actually using some settling basins for our filter backwash reclaim that are from the original plant from the 20s. So we utilize what we got, and that whatever's salvageable we can.
So nothing goes to waste.
No, we try to be cognizant of the money that we spend and how we spend it.
Right.
For our customers.
Right, yeah, because public money, isn't it? And
right.
Yeah, so we're all very responsible for the fact that we've got to take care of that and invest it properly.
Right.
So go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
So you were recently down at a big conference. What were you talking about down
Well,
there?
I've actually been to several conferences. The ACE. I'm actually chairman of the North Dakota section of the American Water Works Association right now. which has been interesting. And I've been to the national at ACE in San Antonio, Texas. The conference I was just at was actually a national oral health care conference, because it was kind of some of the things we've been doing up in North Dakota up here to promote water fluoridation and to educate operators on how to properly do fluoridation and issues they may have when concerns that people call in about fluoride, which fluoride is a naturally occurring element, and we just supplement it to bring it to what the health folks say and dental folks say is the optimum value.
So you do, I mean, there are people that do call in about that. What do you say to them when they call in?
Just try and educate them with the facts, tell them all the other things we do here at the plant, and then if they still have any questions, send them to the American Fluoridation Society website, the CDC website, or the ADA, American Dental Association website. Those are the health-orientated people that have done the research and facts.
What do you think are the big questions people have when they call in? What is your experience of the kind of concerns they have?
Anything in general?
Right.
Usually they have a taste and odor problem or something in their home, or it smells like chlorine. Well, our lab staff will actually go out and check it. A lot of time it relates to a home water system of some kind, a filter that hasn't been changed. There are some times when they have lower chlorine residuals or something going on in their area of town, then our distribution department will flush and just, make sure they're getting fresh water. There's always, you can take the best water in the world if you run it through an old cast iron main or anything, or just anything that's bad, or, even if it's been construction going on, there can be some issues with that.
Now, you've got a couple of really kind of nicely equipped labs here and staff to do that. Tell us a little bit about that part of the process here.
Actually, our lab staff handle both the water and the wastewater, so the three of them are pretty busy. But they'll do our bacteria sampling. We are actually a certified lab to do our own bacteria testing, which makes it kind of nice, because if we have an issue out in our distribution system, whether it was an actual positive Bac-T sample, or it was just something got contaminated by a bad bottle, somebody's finger in it, a dirty faucet head or whatever they were taking it out of. So we can actually do that, know the results in 24 hours rather than sending it out to somebody else, and we can see what we got to do. We can retest more quickly and just make sure everything is proper before we get into any type of situation where we'd have to have, say, a boil order or something on.
Yeah, I have to take these samples and send them into the lab here, and I don't know for a week what the answer is usually.
Right, and then if you have to take another sample in the following week and you had a positive one, you take that one and then you have another positive one, you're on a boil order.
Right.
We actually have, as town that you're working in is, probably one a month. We actually have, with our based on our population, we have to do 80 Bac-T samples in a month. 80, and I think Fargo has to do 100.
Wow.
Because it's all based on population.
Wow.
So yeah, and we split it up where we do 20 a week. We'll do a 4-month week. We'll do 20 every week, and then we take them from different parts of our distribution system. We have a fairly good sized distribution system with probably about 350 or more miles of pipe. That's really not my department, but I know just enough to be dangerous on it.
Right. Well, that's kind of cool that you've got that right in-house. You've got those labs in-house,
Yep.
So you know right away if there's something wrong and you get on it right away.
And they keep our other lab equipment calibrated and stuff. Our operators will do some for their normal testing, but the lab staff, I want to say ladies, but they are lab staff, and they just keep everything rolling and everything accurate.
So, Jim, what would you say are the biggest challenges of providing fresh, clean drinking water to the inhabitants of Bismarck?
Well, it's probably not just Bismarck, but it's statewide, nationwide. There's always emerging contaminant levels that EPA regulates us with. For the PFAS and PFOs, that's the newest, biggest one. It's all the different regulations, which a lot of them are good, but sometimes they're carried just a little too far. They're just way extreme, and it's planned out where you got to do this, and this, but there's no financial aid to make it happen. Things just don't happen overnight. It was in certain situations. That's probably one of the biggest things. You get customer complaints on some things, and most of them aren't related to the actual water leaving here. That's kind of frustrating sometimes, but you have to deal with it. You be nice and polite, and then there's always people complaining about their water bill, and couldn't have been that high, but their toilet was running for a month, a gallon a minute for 2 months.
Right.
So
right.
that just
That
gets a
adds
little
up.
frustrating.
Sure does add up. So Jim, what's a typical day for you here in the plant? You come to work, and typically on a typical day, what do you do?
Well, right now I'm more on checking on production and stuff. You know, being superintendent, I've done it all here basically. You know, from in the trenches operating, supervising the operators and the maintenance staff. Now it's just a matter of more of the regulatory stuff and making sure all of the reports are done, checking the process. You know, I actually have a supervisor that works under me. He does most of it, but then I'm checking his work, and we're just making sure the whole process is working good, looking at numbers. Right now it's budget stuff, so I'm more on that administrative side than anything else now, just reporting and budgeting, and you know, just sometimes just trying to get different things you need, like carbon dioxide or lime, or you know, there's shortages certain times of the year, and usually when you're the busiest, of course, so you got to figure alternative routes and different things, and sometimes pull a rabbit out of your hat.
Do you miss being down on the tools?
A little bit, but at my age now, and after being an operator for 29 years, I don't miss the shift work. But there's headaches in administration too.
Right.
You know, everybody's problem is your problem. Ultimately you're responsible for what everybody else under you does.
Right.
I've got a really good crew here. You know, they make me look good, and I appreciate them every chance I can.
That's cool. Looking forward, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing the whole water industry, not just here in Bismarck, but what do you see as the biggest challenges ahead of us?
There's a lot of things, but you know, cybersecurity is always a big thing. Funding is always a big thing. Right now, everybody's going through the lead service line assessment and replacement. That's a big project. We actually started 3 or 4 years ago, and that's where we're ahead of the game. Our people that are responsible for that have actually taught at our local North Dakota section, you know, on what we've been doing at some of our local conferences. So we're ahead of the game there. You know, I know out west, drought stuff is, you know, it could happen here. We've been through droughts in the 40 years I've been here, but we can usually get by. You know, the biggest thing is, you know, Colorado River and stuff out west. I don't know. East is probably more contaminants and things like that from the industry, and just different regulations that they can come up with, and they find out different things, and they can test parameters down to parts per trillion now, and they're regulating some of them. So it's just keeping up with the changes in the water industry, and that's where, like I said, the journals and stuff for the American Water Works Association, and just networking with people both locally, because locally we have probably the same problems together, and you go nationally, you find out what other people are dealing with also.
Yeah, this certainly right. You're right. This lead service line inventory is a big deal. I was driving around our little city yesterday, and we're trying to figure out, you know, what about these empty houses, and do they have a service line, and how do we even figure out what it is? And so it's a big challenge, isn't it?
And then we got roughly 24,000 customers, so it's a little bit bigger, but there are ways to isolate it, different things. There's also help you can get from some engineering firms. I know Rural Water actually has helped with that, and there's several other engineering firms that the state has said they can help you do this, and we're all working through it together.
Yeah, it's a project, that's for sure. So Jim, somebody like me who's just come into I've been making films for a long time, but now I'm in the water industry and I'm trying to do my part here. So what's your advice to somebody that's new to the industry? What advice would you have? You know, you've got a long experience here.
Well, you know, it may not be your first choice of a career, but it's not a bad one. You're not going to starve to death, but you're not going to be a millionaire either. But it's very rewarding. It's always going to be there, because you're always going to need clean water. I guess for training, whatever you can get. I know they have several different schools you can go to. We take some from the power and process plant stuff that we have. There is actually an online course up here at the local college to get a degree in water and wastewater operators, but that's a big issue in our industry also, is the retirements are going pretty fast and the replacement rate isn't as strong. One thing, we can actually have one operator run this plant, but we're 24/7, 365, but one person can run this plant due to SCADA technology and control technology, and some plants are monitored and worked at from home. Some of the smaller ones, you've got a computer, but then if you don't follow the proper guidelines, you got the risk of an attack there and throwing everything out of whack too.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn, that's for sure.
But yeah, just getting into the industry is just apprenticeship type stuff. I know we've had job shadows from that college course. Just study, being young and starting into it. It's just any type of process. It's all process, whether it's electricity, oil, gas, water. It's still a process. You have a lot of common parameters with pumps, and water is everything for all these industries.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Is there anything else you'd like to share for our listeners here?
I guess I'm good if you are, sir.
Well, Jim, I just really appreciate you coming on. So this is Jim Kershaw. He's the superintendent of the Bismarck water treatment plant here, right down next to the Missouri River. And he's the man that runs it all down here. So thank you.
Thank you, John.
You have been listening to Water, the podcast, with filmmaker and municipal operator John Parsons. Subscribe via your favorite podcast platform. If you'd like to be a guest, or if you need a film or video to communicate your message, find us at waterthepodcast.com.